The gavel crashed like thunder in the packed courtroom, Judge Clarence Dutton's icy blue eyes glinting as he barked, "Case dismissed. Pay the fine, Miss Ellis, or lose everything." Nia Ellis, a black woman in a faded jacket, stood unshaken before the smirking crowd in Dayton, Ohio. She nodded, lips curling into a sharp, knowing grin, and whispered, "You'll regret this." The judge scoffed, assuming her broke powerless. Little did he know Nia was a legal prodigy, and this moment would unravel his corrupt empire, piece by brutal piece. What had she unleashed? Before we dive in, let me know where you're watching from, and if you stand for justice, hit like and subscribe, because tomorrow's wild twist is one you can't miss. Nia Ellis slumped onto a creaky folding chair in her cramped apartment, the faint hum of a neon sign buzzing through the thin walls. The place sat perched above a shuttered barbershop on Dayton, Ohio's west side, where the air smelled of rust and faded dreams. She stared at the crisp white envelope on the wobbly table, its edges sharp enough to cut. Inside, a notice from the county screamed in bold black ink, $200,000 in fines for housing violations on her late father's rental property, a modest two-story brick building 3 streets over. Her fingers traced the words, cracked steps and peeling paint, each accusation a flimsy lie that twisted her stomach into knots. This wasn't a mistake. This was Judge Clarence Dutton's handiwork, a calculated strike she'd seen coming ever since that smug bastard leaned over his bench and dismissed her plea hours ago. She kicked off her scuffed sneakers, the soles, worn thin from pacing the cracked sidewalks of this dying neighborhood. Once the west side thrummed with life, kids chasing each other past corner stores, old men swapping stories outside the barbershop, her father's laughter echoing as he fixed leaky pipes for tenants who paid what they could. Now, it was a ghost. Town of boarded windows and weed-choked lots, hollowed out by Dutton's racket. Nia knew the pattern cold. First came the fines, bloated and baseless, slapped on black landlords like her dad until they buckled. Then the foreclosures, swift as vultures on carrion. Finally the sales, always to the same man. Victor Hensley, a wiry real estate shark with a grin like a blade and a handshake with every crooked official in town. Her father's property, the last piece of his legacy, was just the latest target. In their game, Nia's jaw tightened as she shoved the notice aside and grabbed her laptop, its screen flickering to life with a dull glow. She wasn't just some cashier scraping by at the corner mart, though that's what Dutton and his cronies assumed. Beneath the faded jacket and quiet demeanor burned a mind honed at Yale law, a secret she'd buried deep after leaving the high-stakes world of corporate firms. She'd come back to Dayton to live simply, to honor her father's memory, not to fight. But Dutton had forced her hand, and now she'd play his game her way. Her fingers flew across the keys, pulling up county records with the precision of a surgeon. She cross-checked dates, fines, and property transfers, her pulse quickening as the pieces snapped together. There it was, a trail of forged inspection logs, signatures scrawled by ghost officials, dates that didn't match city schedules. Dutton wasn't just skimming. He was orchestrating a heist, stripping black families of their homes under the guise of law. The clock ticked past midnight, its hands glowing faintly on the wall as Nia pieced together the evidence. She found 6 other properties hit with identical fines in the past year, all owned by black folks, all sold to Hensley's shell companies within weeks of foreclosure. One file caught her eye. A widow named Mrs. Carver, fined for structural damage on a house she'd kept spotless. The inspection report claimed a sagging roof, but Nia dug up a photo from a tenant's social media, dated the same week, showing a sturdy, freshly shingled top. Forgery, plain as day. Another case showed a fine for unpermitted repairs. Yet the permit application sat unprocessed in the county's backlog, stamped with a clerk's note. Hold per Judge D. Dutton's initials. Her blood boiled, the heat rising in her chest like steam off asphalt in July. She leaned back, rubbing her eyes with calloused palms. This wasn't random greed. It was a war on her people, a slow strangling of a community, already fighting to breathe. Her father had died 2 years back, heart giving out after decades of labor, leaving her the property as a lifeline. She'd rented it cheap to a single mom, Tanya, who'd lost her own place when Hensley snatched. it up last spring. Now Dutton wanted this one too, and Nia saw the future clear as glass. Tanya evicted, the house razed for some overpriced condo no one here could afford, another chunk of the west side gone white and sterile. Not if she could help it. Nia grabbed a legal pad, its edges curling from humidity, and started drafting. She'd challenged the fine, hit them with their own lies. Her Yale days flooded back. Late nights dissecting statutes, outsmarting professors who'd underestimated her brown skin and quick tongue. She scribbled a motion to contest the violations, attaching the forged logs and mismatched dates. Every word was a weapon, sharp and deliberate, aimed at Dutton's throne. She'd file it first thing tomorrow, demand a hearing, force him to face her evidence. Her lips twitched into a grim smile as she imagined his pinched face, those cold eyes, narrowing when she walked in. He'd dismissed her today, thinking her beaten. He had no idea who he'd provoked. The laptop hummed as she pulled up the court schedule, her heart sinking like a stone in the muddy Ohio River. Her filing landed her a date next week, and the presiding judge? Clarence Dutton himself. Of course. His name stared back at her, a taunt in block letters. She'd be walking straight into his den, a black woman with a cashier's apron facing a kingpin in robes. The odds stacked against her like bricks on a crumbling wall, but Nia didn't flinch. She'd seen worse in New Haven, clawed her way through rooms where she was the only one who looked like her. Dutton thought he held all the cards, but she'd been playing this game longer than he knew. She stood, stretching her stiff shoulders, and crossed to the window. Outside, the street lay quiet under a bruised purple sky, streetlights flickering like tired sentinels. The barbershop's faded signs swung in the breeze, a relic of better days. Her father's voice echoed in her mind, rough but warm. This place is ours, Nia, they don't get to take it. She'd believed him then, a kid with pigtails and big dreams. Now staring at the wreckage of his world, she felt the weight of that promise. Dutton's fine wasn't just an attack on her bank account, it was a spit on her father's grave, a shove to push her out of the only home she'd ever known, Nia. Turned back to the table, snatching a pen to finish her notes. She'd hit the courthouse at dawn, file the motion before they could blink. Her evidence was ironclad, enough to make a clerk sweat, maybe even force a review. She pictured Dutton's smirk faltering, his gavel hesitating mid-air. He'd underestimated her, pegged her as another broke tenant he could crush under his boot. But Nia Ellis wasn't broke, and she sure as hell wasn't powerless. She was a storm brewing, and this fine was just the match to light her fuse. Night deepened, shadows pooling in the corners as she sealed the motion in an envelope. Her chest tightened with a mix of dread and fire. She knew Dutton wouldn't roll over. Men like him never did. He'd built his empire on the backs of folks like her, and he'd fight dirty to keep it. She'd seen the glint in his eyes today, the casual cruelty of a man who thought he was untouchable. Filing this challenge was a declaration, a line in the sand. Once she dropped it in the clerk's hands, there'd be no turning back. Nia slipped the envelope into her bag, her fingers brushing the worn leather strap her father had patched with duct tape years ago. She could still smell his pipe tobacco, on it, faint but steady. This fight wasn't just for her or Tanya or even the West Side. It was for him, for every calloused hand that had built this place only to watch it snatched away. She flicked off the lamp, the room plunging into darkness, save for the neon's sickly glow seeping through the blinds. Tomorrow, she'd step into Dutton's world, a lone black woman against a machine oiled with hate. He'd regret ever putting her name on that notice. She'd make damn sure of it. Nia Ellis stepped into Judge Clarence Dutton's courtroom, her boots echoing on the scuffed marble floor of the Montgomery County Courthouse. The air hung heavy with the musk of old wood and arrogance, a stench that matched the all-white gallery, sprawled across the benches. Their smirks gleamed like polished knives, slicing through the room as she approached the plaintiff's table, her faded jacket brushing against her sides. She carried a thick folder, its edges crisp with purpose, stuffed with photos of her father's rental property. Walls smooth as fresh cream, steps solid as stone, paint so bright it could blind. She'd spent the week after filing her motion, chasing down receipts from contractors, their signatures scrawled in ink still damp with her sweat. This wasn't just a defense. It was a blade aimed at Dutton's throat. Could she really pierce his armor with proof alone? The judge loomed on his bench, a vulture in black robes, his icy blue eyes flicking over her like she was a speck on his polished shoes. His gavel rested in his meaty hand, a scepter of power he'd wielded for decades to crush folks like her. The clerk called the case, her voice a monotone drone. Ellis versus Montgomery County, contesting property violation. Phoenix. Nia squared her shoulders, her pulse a drumbeat in her ears. She'd faced rooms like this at Yale, professors doubting her every word, but this was different. This was Dayton, where the law wasn't blind. It was a fist aimed at black necks. What chance did she have against a man who owned the scales? Your Honor, Nia began, her voice steady as steel, I present evidence proving the $200,000 fine is baseless. She slid the folder forward, photos spilling out like a deck of winning cards. These show the property. In pristine condition days before the citation. No cracks, no peeling, no violations. Here's a receipt for a gutter repair, dated last month, paid in full. And this, she tapped a grainy printout, is a county log with a forged inspector's name, a ghost who never set foot on my land. The gallery shifted, a ripple of whispers snaking through the crowd. Had she just cracked the facade of Dutton's empire? Dutton leaned forward, his jowls quivering as he snatched the folder with a grunt. He flipped through it, his thick fingers smudging the edges, then tossed it aside like trash onto the bench. The papers fluttered, a soft thud echoing in the silence. This proves nothing, he barked, his voice a gravelly sneer. A few pictures and a sob story don't erase your responsibility, Miss Ellis. You think you can waltz in here and waste my time? His lips curled, baring yellowed teeth. Motion. Denied. And for this frivolous filing, I'm increasing the fine to $300,000, payable in 30 days, or that dump you call a legacy goes to auction. Did he really think he could bury her with a flick of his wrist? Nia's heart skipped, a jolt of ice surging through her veins. $300,000. The number rang in her skull, a death knell for her father's dream. She'd expected bias, a slapdown even. But this was a guillotine, swift and merciless. The gallery erupted in snickers, a chorus of glee from pale faces who saw her as prey. Your Honor, she said, her tone sharp enough to cut glass, this evidence demands a review. It's irrefutable proof of fraud. Dutton's grin widened. A predator savoring the kill. Irrefutable? I decide what's truth here, not you, case closed. His gavel slammed, a crack that split the air, and Nia stood frozen, her fists curling at her sides. Was this justice, or just a white man's game? She turned to leave, her boots scuffing the floor, the weight of $300,000 dragging at her spine. The crowd parted, their smirks a gauntlet she forced herself through, head high despite the storm in her chest. She'd known Dutton was crooked, but this was raw, unmasked hate, a punishment for daring to stand tall. Outside, the Ohio sun blazed, its heat a slap against her skin as she crossed the courthouse steps. Her beat-up sedan waited in the lot, a rusting lifeline parked under a sagging oak. But as she neared, her breath caught, a jagged gasp clawing up her throat. What fresh hell had they unleashed now? The car's windows lay in shards across the asphalt, glittering like broken teeth. All four tires sagged flat, slashed to ribbons, the rubber curling like dead snakes. A brick sat lodged in the driver's seat, its red surface etched with jagged white letters. Know your place. Nia's knees buckled, a tremble she couldn't stop racing up her legs. She scanned the lot, the air thick with the buzz of cicadas and the distant hum of traffic. No witnesses, no cameras, just the echo of Dutton's gavel in her mind. This wasn't just about money anymore. This was a war on her race, a message, carved in stone and glass. Could they really silence her with threats? She knelt, her fingers brushing the brick's rough edge, the words searing into her vision. Know your place. She'd heard it before, whispered in Yale halls, shouted on Dayton streets, a refrain meant to shrink her, to chain her to the margins. But Nia wasn't her father, bending under pressure until his heart gave out. She wasn't Tanya, evicted and broken. She was a storm, and this brick was fuel on her fire. Her pulse steadied, a slow burn replacing the shock. Dutton thought he'd won, that this would scare her off. He didn't know she'd studied men like him, dissected their weaknesses in law school late nights. What would he do when she struck back harder? Nia stood, the brick heavy in her hand, her eyes narrowing as she glared at the courthouse's gray bulk. She could still feel the gallery's laughter, Dutton's sneer, the weight of their privilege pressing down. This wasn't greed. It was a crusade to erase her people, to bleach the West Side clean of its roots. Her father's property wasn't just a building. It was a stand against that tide, a brick-and-mortar defiance. She'd vowed to protect it, to honor his sweat-soaked years. Now, with $300,000 looming and her car a wreck, that vow felt like a noose tightening. But surrender, never. Was she crazy to think she could topple a giant? She tossed the brick into the grass, its thud a quiet promise. She'd call a tow truck, scrape by on her cashier's paycheck, but she wouldn't stop. The evidence she'd gathered was just the start, a pebble in the dam. Dutton's empire ran deeper than one fine, one forgery. She'd dig until she found the roots, until she could rip them out and watch him choke on his own dirt. Her lips twitched, a grim smirk breaking through the fury. He'd regret this day, regret underestimating the black woman he'd dismissed as powerless. But as she walked away, her shadow stretching long across the lot, a chill snaked up her spine. What price would she pay for this fight? The sun dipped lower, casting the courthouse in a blood-orange glow, its spire a spear against the sky. Nia's mind raced, plotting her next move. She'd need more than photos, more than logs. She'd need allies, proof so loud it couldn't be ignored. Dutton's allies were watching now, their hands dirty with the same hate. That brick wasn't a lone act. It was a warning from a machine that crushed defiance. She clenched her jaw, the taste of resolve bitter on her tongue. This was her first stand and she'd lost, but it wouldn't be her last. What monsters waited in the shadows she'd just stirred? If you think Nia's right to keep fighting despite the odds, comment number 1 below, hit that like button, and subscribe for more twists in her battle against corruption. Should she have backed down after that brick smashed her world, or is her defiance worth the risk? Drop your thoughts, because the next chapter's brewing something dark. What's Dutton planning to crush her next? Nia Ellis leaned against the sticky vinyl booth, in a dim diner off Route 35, the flicker of a dying bulb casting jagged shadows across her face. The place smelled of burnt coffee and grease, a truck stop relic 10 miles outside Dayton where the hum of semis drowned out the world. Her car sat in a tow yard, its slashed tires a memory she couldn't shake, but she'd scraped together bus fare to meet Jamal Carter here. He slid into the seat across from her, a wiry black man in his 30s, his court clerk badge glinting faintly under his unzipped hoodie. His eyes darted to the window, then back to her, sweat beading on his brow despite the chill. Nia's pulse ticked up. He looked like a man running from ghosts. "You're late," she said, her voice low, cutting through the clatter of a waitress stacking plates. Jamal didn't apologize, just fished a thumb drive from his pocket and slid it across the table, its black plastic scratched and warm from his grip. "This is what you wanted," he muttered, barely above a whisper. "Sealed memos, straight from Dutton's office. Ties him to Hensley's land grabs, dates and all. I risked my job for this, Nia. Don't screw me over." She snatched it, her fingers brushing the cool metal edge, and tucked it into her jacket. Could this tiny thing really crack the judge's armor? She'd tracked Jamal down after the courthouse fiasco, a name whispered by a tenant who'd seen him slip files to a lawyer years back. He'd worked under Dutton for a decade, a silent cog in the machine, but something had shifted. Maybe it was the brick through her car, the $300,000 fine, or just the weight of too many stolen homes. Nia didn't care why. She cared what he had. "How solid is it?" she asked, leaning in, her breath fogging the air between them. Jamal's jaw tightened. Solid enough to burn him. Emails about rigging inspections, pushing fines through back channels. Hensley's. Names on every page. Her chest sparked with hope, a flicker in the dark. Was this the edge she'd been clawing for? The diner's door creaked. a gust of cold wind slicing through, and Jamal flinched, his hand jerking to his pocket. Nia followed his gaze. Just a trucker in a flannel cap, stomping snow off his boots. "Relax," she said, but her own nerves buzzed. She'd walked into Dutton's world with evidence before, only to get slapped down. This felt different, heavier, like holding a live wire. She stood, zipping her jacket over the drive. "I'll make it count," she promised, her voice firm despite the tremor in her gut. Jamal nodded, his eyes hollow. "You better. They're watching, Nia, closer than you think." What did he know that she didn't? She rode the last bus back to Dayton, the thumb drive a burning weight against her ribs. The city sprawled dark and jagged under a moonless sky, its west side streets silent, save for the occasional bark of a stray dog. Her apartment loomed ahead, the barbershop sign creaking in the wind like a warning. She climbed the narrow stairs, her boots thudding on warped wood, and unlocked the door with a shaky hand. The lock clicked and she froze. The air inside felt wrong, thick with a scent that wasn't hers, cigarette smoke and cheap cologne. Her stomach dropped as she pushed the door wide, the hinges squealing into the void. What had they done? The room was a battlefield. Her folding chair lay splintered in the corner, its metal legs twisted like broken bones. The table teetered on 3 legs, her laptop gone, its cord dangling like a severed artery. Papers littered the floor, her legal pad shredded into confetti, the fine notice torn in half. Couch cushions bled, stuffing onto the rug, slashed open with a blade's precision. Nia's breath hitched, her eyes darting to the spot where she'd left her bag. Empty. The thumb drive, her golden ticket, was gone. She sank to her knees, glass crunching under her palms, a scream clawing up her throat but dying silent. How had they known? Her phone buzzed, a jolt that snapped her head up. She fumbled it from her pocket, the screen glowing in the wreckage. A voicemail timestamped 10 minutes ago. She hit play, her hand trembling as a voice rasped through, distorted and guttural. "Back off, or your sister pays." The line cut to static, leaving her ears ringing. Keisha, her little sister 2 blocks away in a duplex by the old steel mill, a nurse who'd never hurt a soul. Nia bolted up, glass grinding under her soles, and grabbed her keys. The ransacking was a punch, but this was a knife to her heart. Could they really touch Keisha? She sprinted through the night, her breath fogging in the frigid air. The streets a blur of shadowed hulks and flickering lights. Her legs burned, lungs aching as she rounded the corner to Keisha's place, a squat brick building with a flickering porch bulb. The door hung ajar. Wood splintered around the lock and Nia's blood turned to ice. She shoved inside, her voice cracking as she shouted, "Keisha!" The living room stood untouched, a stark contrast to her own ruin. Couch neat, TV humming. Low. She raced to the bedroom, finding Keisha curled on the bed, her face buried in a pillow, shoulders shaking, alive. Safe. But for how long? "Nia?" Keisha sat up, her eyes red-rimmed, voice trembling. "What's happening?" Nia knelt beside her, gripping her hands, the warmth a lifeline. "They're coming for us," she said, her words sharp with dread. "Dutton's people. They hit my place, took everything." Keisha's brow furrowed, confusion warring with fear. "Because of the fine? That's insane." Nia shook her head, the voicemail's hiss looping in her mind. "It's bigger than that. They know I'm digging." She pulled Keisha close, her sister's heartbeat a drum against her own. Had she dragged her into this war? A stench hit her then, acrid and wrong, seeping from outside. Nia crossed to the window, peeling back the curtain, and her gut twisted. The lawn stretched dark and patchy, but in its center, a swastika glowed, burned into the grass with gasoline precision, its edges still smoldering. Keisha gasped behind, her a choked sob breaking free. Nia's fists clenched, nails biting her palms until they bled. This wasn't just a threat, it was a brand, a mark of hate as old as the rusted factories lining the river. Dutton's retaliation had begun, and it wasn't subtle anymore. It was a declaration of war, racial and raw. How far would he go to crush her? She turned to Keisha, her sister's wide eyes reflecting the orange flicker outside. "Pack a bag," Nia said, her voice a steel thread. "You're not staying. Here." Keisha nodded, fumbling for a duffel, her hands shaking as she stuffed clothes inside. Nia paced, her mind racing. The thumb drive was gone, but Jamal had seen it, knew its contents. She could rebuild, retrace her steps, but this swastika changed everything. Dutton wasn't just protecting his racket, he was wielding hate like a club, swinging at her family, her roots. Her Yale brain kicked into gear, plotting angles, but her heart pounded with a primal fury. Was she ready for this fight? They slipped out the back, Keisha's bag slung over Nia's shoulder, the night swallowing them as they ducked between houses. The swastika burned behind them, a beacon of Dutton's power, his allies lurking in the dark. Nia's apartment was trashed, her evidence stolen, her sister threatened, and now this symbol scorched into her world. She'd wanted proof, and Jamal had delivered, but at what cost? The voicemail echoed, a promise of worse to come. She gripped Keisha's arm, guiding her through the shadows, her resolve hardening like concrete. Dutton thought he'd broken. Her tonight. He'd just lit the match. What would he unleash next? Nia Ellis hunched over a borrowed laptop in a dingy motel room on Dayton's outskirts, the glow of the screen painting her face in stark blues. The air stank of mildew and stale smoke, the walls paper-thin, letting in the rumble of a semi-idling outside. Keisha sat cross-legged on the sagging bed, her duffel zipped tight beside her, eyes still puffy from the swastika's glow burned into her lawn last night. Nia's fingers danced across the keys, her breath shallow as she uploaded Jamal's stolen memos to a local blog, Dayton unraveled. She'd duplicated the thumb drive's contents before that diner meet, a precaution that felt like fate now. The files hit the site, sealed emails detailing Judge Clarence Dutton's orders to spike fines, handwritten notes linking him to Victor Hensley's property flips. Could this spark finally ignite the city? She hit publish, the screen flashing. Confirmation, and leaned back, her spine popping from hours bent over. Within minutes, the blog's comments erupted, furious voices from Dayton's west side calling out names. Carver, Holloway, Ellis. Nia's phone buzzed with texts from strangers, tenants, kin of the displaced, all seeing their stories in those pages. By dawn, the streets outside the courthouse churned with life, a sea of black faces spilling across the steel-grey pavement, fists raised, voices roaring. No more fines, no more theft. Placards bobbed above the crowd, scrawled with "Justice for the West Side" in jagged red marker. Nia watched from the motel's cracked window, Keisha peering over her shoulder, a flicker of hope cutting through the dread. Had she just turned the tide? The protest swelled, a pulsing heartbeat against the courthouse's stone facade, chants bouncing off its spire like thunder off the Ohio River. Nia slipped out, blending into the throng, her faded jacket a shield among the coats and scarves. She'd filed a new motion that morning, emailed to the clerk with duplicated evidence from Jamal's drive, demanding the $300,000 fine be vacated. She'd attached screenshots of Dutton's memos, irrefutable proof of his racket, thinking the public glare would force his hand. The crowd parted as she reached the steps, their shouts a wall of sound behind her. She stood tall, her voice cutting through the din. "They can't hide anymore, we've got the truth." Was this the moment they'd finally listen? The air crackled with energy, phones flashing as folks live-streamed her words, the protest rippling online. Nia's chest swelled. She'd cracked Dutton's silence, dragged his filth into the light. She pictured his pinched face, those icy eyes twitching as he scrolled the headlines. He couldn't dismiss this, not with hundreds watching, recording, raging. She turned back to the motel, weaving through the crowd, her steps lighter than they'd been in days. Keisha waited inside, her smile tentative but real. "You did it, Nia," she said, voice soft with awe. "They're fighting with us now." Nia nodded, her mind already racing to the hearing. Could the spotlight really shield her from his wrath? It didn't. By noon, Dutton struck back, his counterattack a sledgehammer to her hope. Nia's phone lit up with alerts, each one a gut punch. Dayton Unraveled went dark, its server hacked, replaced with a single page branding her a race-baiting fraud. Local news channels, owned by Hensley's cronies, ran loops of pundits shredding her name, Nia Ellis, a cashier with delusions, faked documents to stir unrest, one sneered, his tie a garish yellow splash against the screen. Another called her a parasite feeding on racial lies. Her inbox flooded with hate, emails dripping with slurs, threats to torch her nigger shack. How had he twisted her truth so fast? She refreshed the blog, fingers trembling, but the memos were gone, scrubbed from the web like they'd never existed. Her bank app blinked next, a red banner screaming, "Account frozen, suspicious activity." She logged in, her heart sinking, as zeros stared back. Savings, checking, all locked under a county order tied to Dutton's bench. $300,000 was a fantasy now. She couldn't scrape together $30. Keisha's gasp broke the silence, her sister staring at her own phone, face ashen. "They froze mine too," she whispered, showing a matching alert. Nia's fists clenched, nails biting her palms. Was this his plan? To starve them out? The motel room felt smaller, the walls closing in as Nia paced, her boots scuffing the threadbare carpet. She'd thought the crowd would protect her, that daylight would scare Dutton off. Instead, he'd turned it against her, painting her as the villain while his machine tightened its grip. Her Yale brain churned, searching for a countermove, but the air thickened with despair. She'd rallied the West Side, given them a voice, only to watch Dutton drown it in noise. The protest still raged outside, but its fire felt distant, a wee candle flickering against a storm. She grabbed her bag, slinging it over her shoulder. "We're not done," she told Keisha, her voice a raw edge. Could she claw back from this? Dusk settled over Dayton, the sky a bruised purple shroud as Nia stepped out to check the crowd. The chants had softened, folks drifting home, their fury spent. She needed air, needed to think, so she left Keisha in the room, the door locked tight. The street hummed with the last gasps of defiance, a few stragglers waving signs under streetlights. Nia's mind spun, plotting her next filing, a way to unfreeze the accounts. She'd call Jamal, get more files, hit harder. She turned back after 20 minutes, her breath fogging in the chill, and climbed the motel stairs. The door stood shut just as she'd left it. She knocked, a quick rap. No answer. What was wrong? "Keisha." Nia's voice rose, sharp, with sudden dread as she fumbled the key into the lock. The door swung open, and her world tilted. The room lay empty, the bed unrumpled, Keisha's duffel gone. A single shoe, her sister's scuffed sneaker, sat abandoned on the floor, its laces tangled like a cry for help. Nia's knees buckled, a choked scream tearing from her throat. She scanned the space, heart hammering, but no note, no sign, just the silence of absence. The window gaped open, curtains fluttering in the night breeze, a smear of mud on the sill. They'd taken her. Dutton's people had snatched Keisha right under her nose. How had they moved so fast? Nia sank to the floor, the sneaker clutched in her hands, its rubber sole cold against her skin. The protest, the motion, the memos she'd thought she'd won a round, forced Dutton to blink. But this was his answer, a blow sharper than any fine or smear. Her sister, her soft-spoken rock, was gone, ripped away in minutes. The racial war she'd stumbled into wasn't just about homes. It was about lives, about breaking her spirit. Piece by piece, she'd rallied a crowd, but Dutton had rallied his shadows, and they'd struck where it hurt most. Her eyes burned, tears held back by sheer will. What had she unleashed on her family? She stood, the sneaker trembling in her grip, her mind a storm of rage and fear. Dutton thought this would crush her, make her crawl away. He didn't know she'd fought worse, clawed through nights at Yale with nothing but grit. Keisha was out there, and Nia would find her, tear through his empire to do it. The motel's neon buzzed outside, a sickly green pulse in the dark. She'd lost the memos, her money, her sister, but not her fight. Dutton's retaliation had drawn blood, and now she'd draw his. What price would she pay to get Keisha back? If you believe Nia's gamble to go public was worth the cost, comment number 1 below, smash that like button, and subscribe for the next brutal twist. Should she have kept the memos quiet and played it safe, or was lighting this fire her only shot? Let me know your take, because the stakes just skyrocketed. What's Dutton's next move to bury her deeper? Nia Ellis stood frozen in the motel room. Keisha's lone sneaker gripped tight in her hands, its frayed laces cutting into her palms. The neon glow outside pulsed through the open window, bathing the empty space in a sickly green haze. Her sister was gone, snatched in the 20 minutes Nia had stepped out to breathe, leaving behind nothing but silence and that damn shoe. The air thickened with the motel's damp rot, but her mind was a razor, slicing through panic to focus. Dutton's. People had done this, a gut punch after she'd lit up the west side with those memos. Her chest heaved, breaths shallow and sharp when her phone buzzed on the carpet, a harsh vibration that jolted her spine. She dropped the sneaker, snatching the device with trembling fingers. A blocked number flashed on the screen, and she answered, pressing it to her ear. Static crackled, then a voice slithered through, distorted by a filter, low and guttural like gravel under boots. Drop the case or Keisha's dead. The words landed like a fist, knocking the air from her lungs. You've got 12 hours, no cops, no tricks, or we dump her in the river. The line went dead, a hollow beep echoing in her skull. Nia's knees buckled, but she caught herself on the bed frame, its rusty edge biting her hand. 12 hours to save her sister from Dutton's shadows. Her Yale brain kicked in, shoving fear aside as she replayed the call. The distortion couldn't mask a faint hum in the background, a mechanical drone she knew from childhood summers near the old steel mills. She grabbed Keisha's laptop from the duffel, untouched by the kidnappers, and hacked into a call-tracing app she'd used in law school to track deadbeat clients. Her fingers flew, sweat beading on her brow as the app pinged a tower near the abandoned Kessler factory, a hulking ruin 5 miles north on the riverbank. The hum matched, generators rusting but alive. Nia's pulse raced. She had a location. She rummaged through the room, finding a tire iron under the bed, its weight cold and solid in her grip. No time for plans, just action. The night swallowed her. She sprinted to the street, hailing a cab with the last $10 in her pocket. The driver, a grizzled man with a grey beard, barely glanced at her as she barked, "Kessler factory, fast!" The cab lurched north, tires squealing on wet pavement, the city's lights blurring into streaks of gold and red. Nia clutched the set tire iron, her knuckles whitening, mind-churning. Dutton had escalated from fines to abduction, a racial vendetta to break her will. Keisha, sweet Keisha, who patched up kids at the clinic, was bait in his trap. The cab screeched to a stop a block from the factory, its skeletal frame looming against the starry sky, and Nia slipped out, shadows cloaking her faded jacket. She crept closer, the river's dank breath mixing with the tang of oil and decay. The factory's windows gaped black, jagged teeth in a crumbling jaw, but a faint yellow glow leaked from a side door. That hum pulsed louder now, a heartbeat from rusted machines inside. Nia circled wide, her boots sinking into muddy gravel, until she found a broken grate near the loading dock. She squeezed through, the metal scraping her hips, and dropped into a cavernous hall. Dust motes danced in the dim light, and there, in the far corner, Keisha sat bound to a chair, duct tape over her mouth, eyes wide with terror. 2 masked thugs paced nearby, one hulking, the other lean, both in black hoodies stinking of sweat and hate. Nia's grip tightened on the tire iron, her breath steadying as she edged along the wall, sticking to the shadows of toppled crates. The lean one muttered, "Boss says she's got till dawn, then we slit her." The hulking one chuckled, a wet rasp, and turned to check a buzzing phone. Nia saw her shot. She lunged, swinging the iron in a vicious arc, catching the lean thug's temple with a sickening crack. He crumpled, blood pooling under his mask, and the big one roared, charging her like a bull. She ducked, his fist grazing her shoulder, and drove the iron up into his jaw. Bone snapped, a wet crunch, and he staggered, clutching his face as she swung again, dropping him cold beside his partner. She bolted to Keisha, ripping the tape free with shaking hands. "Nia!" Keisha gasped, tears streaking her cheeks as Nia sliced the ropes with a shard of glass from the floor. "They jumped me, dragged me out the window." Nia pulled her up, her sister's legs wobbly but holding. "We're out of here," she hissed, scanning the hall. The thugs twitched, groaning, not dead, but down. Sirens wailed in the distance. a faint howl growing closer. Someone had called the cops, maybe a watchman spooked by the noise. Nia grabbed Keisha's arm, hauling her toward the grate, her heart pounding as they squeezed back into the night, mud slick under their feet. They stumbled through the dark, the river's edge a silver ribbon guiding them south. Nia's lungs burned, her shoulder throbbing where the thug's fist had clipped her, but Keisha was alive, trembling beside her. They flagged a late night bus, its driver half asleep and collapsed into the back seats, the factory shrinking behind them. Nia's mind raced. She'd beaten the clock, snatched her sister from Dutton's claws. The protests, the memos, her defiance had pushed him to this, a desperate grab to silence her. She squeezed Keisha's hand, her sister's pulse a fragile thread against her own. They'd made it, or so she thought. The bus dropped them near Keisha's duplex, the swastika's ashes still staining the lawn under moonlight. Nia led her inside, locking the door, her body sagging against the frame. "You're safe now," she said, voice hoarse with relief. Keisha nodded, sinking onto the couch, her face buried in her hands. Nia turned to grab water from the kitchen, her boots leaving muddy prints on the tile. She'd won this round, outsmarted Dutton's goons with grit and a tire iron. Her lips twitched, a flicker of triumph cutting through the exhaustion. She'd get Keisha to a friend's place tomorrow, somewhere off his radar. But as she filled a glass, red and blue lights flashed through the blinds, sharp and sudden. A fist pounded the door, a voice barking, "Dayton PD, open up!" Nia's stomach dropped, the glass slipping from her hand to shatter on the floor. She rushed back, finding Keisha wide-eyed as two cops stormed in, badges glinting, hands on holsters. "Keisha Ellis?" the taller one snapped, his buzz cut gleaming under the bulb. "So you're under arrest." Nia stepped forward, her voice a blade. "For what?" The cop smirked, pulling a baggie of white powder from his pocket. "Found this in her purse. Possession with intent." Keisha's jaw dropped, a choked, "That's not mine," spilling out as the second cop cuffed her wrists, the metal clicking shut. Nia's world spun, her fists clenching as the taller cop shoved the baggie in her face. "Planted it at the motel, huh? Real smart." He laughed, a dry bark, and dragged Keisha toward the door. Nia lunged, blocked by the second cop's arm, his grip iron on her shoulder. "Back off, or you're next," he growled, eyes cold, with Dutton's venom. She froze, watching Keisha stumble outside, her sister's pleas swallowed by the night. The squad car peeled away, lights fading, leaving Nia alone in the duplex, glass crunching under her boots. She'd fought, freed Keisha, only for Dutton's cronies to frame her in minutes, a racial trap snapping shut. She sank to the couch, the baggie's image burned into her mind. Planted, obvious as the swastika, but the system didn't care. Dutton had lost the factory fight, so he'd hit harder, twisting the law to cage her sister. Nia's hands shook, rage boiling over the fear. She'd outmuscled his thugs, but he'd outplayed her with badges. Keisha, bruised and terrified, was back in his grasp, a pawn to break her. Nia stood, resolve hardening like steel in her veins. She'd tear through his lies, rip Keisha free again. Dutton thought this was checkmate. He'd just started the real game. Nia Ellis stormed through the Montgomery County courthouse doors, her boots pounding the marble like war drums, a USB stick clutched in her fist like a grenade. The air buzzed with the tang of floor wax and whispered threats, the same halls where Dutton had crushed her days ago, now her battlefield. Keisha sat in a jail cell 2 miles away, framed with planted drugs after Nia's factory rescue, a racial gut punch from the judge's crooked machine. She'd spent the night scouring security footage from a corner store near the motel, her eyes bloodshot, fingers cramped from fast-forwarding grainy frames. There it was, a cop slipping the baggie into Keisha's purse while Nia fought at the factory, his badge glinting under a street lamp. Could this clip break the chains Dutton had locked around her sister? She shoved into courtroom 5, the gallery packed with West Side faces, their murmurs a low roar under the vaulted ceiling. No smirking white crowd this time. These were her people, fists clenched, eyes sharp with hope and fury. Nia slapped her motion on the plaintiff's table, a bail request for Keisha, her voice slicing through the din. "Your Honor, I've got proof the arrest was a setup." Judge Clarence Dutton loomed above, his robes a dark shroud, icy blue eyes narrowing as he tapped his gavel with a lazy thud. "Another stunt, Miss Ellis," he drawled, lips curling like a snake tasting blood. "Let's see this so-called proof." Was he ready to face the mirror she'd hold up? Nia plugged the USB into the court's projector, her pulse a jackhammer as the screen flickered to life. The footage rolled, crisp and damning. The cop, a buzz-cut brute named Hargrove lurking near the motel lot, glancing around before sliding the powder into Keisha's unzipped purse. The timestamp matched Nia's factory brawl, a perfect alibi. Gasps rippled through the gallery, a woman in a knitted cap shouting, "That's their game!" Nia locked eyes with Dutton, her tone steel-edged. "This officer's under your jurisdiction, Your Honor. The drugs were planted to punish us for exposing your racket. Release my sister now." The room erupted, chairs scraping, voices clashing like thunder. Had she just cracked his throne? Dutton's face twitched, a muscle jumping under his jowl. But his grin held cold and cruel. He leaned forward, gavel hovering, and the gallery stilled, breath held. "Interesting video," he said, voice dripping venom, "but it changes nothing. Could be doctored, could be coincidence. Bail's granted, $5,000, but you're fine, Miss Ellis." His eyes glinted, a predator's gleam. "For wasting this court's time again, it's now $1 million, payable in 20 days, or you rot in foreclosure and contempt." The gavel slammed, a gunshot in the chaos, and Nia's heart lurched. $1 million. The gallery roared, a tidal wave of outrage crashing over the benches. Was this his way of burying her alive? She stood rooted, the USB warm in her palm. The crowd's fury a lifeline she couldn't grasp. $5,000 for bail she could scrape together, but $1 million. It was a death sentence, a fine no cashier could pay. A racial lash meant to snap her spine. "Your Honor," she snapped, "this is retaliation, not justice." Dutton smirked, leaning back. "Justice is what I say it is. Pay or rot." He waved her off, robes rustling as he rose, leaving the courtroom in chaos. Nia's fists balled, nails digging crescents into her skin. She'd freed Keisha's body, but Dutton had chained her soul. Could she climb out of this pit? The crowd surged around her as she pushed out, their shouts a storm against the courthouse walls. "We're with you, Nia," a man yelled, his voice rough with years of labor. She nodded, throat tight, and slipped into the dusk, the sky a bruised purple veil over Dayton. She'd get Keisha out by morning, pawn what little she had left. The footage had landed a blow, forced Dutton to blink, but his counter was a sledgehammer. $1 million echoed in her mind, a number that mocked her every step back to her apartment. She climbed the stairs, the barbershop sign creaking below, and unlocked the door, exhaustion dragging at her bones. Then the smell hit her, smoke, thick and choking. Her eyes widened, a scream clawing up as flames licked the walls, orange tongues devouring the curtains she'd hung last spring. The couch blazed, a pyre spitting embers onto the rug, and the table melted under a river of fire. Nia stumbled, back coughing, the heat searing her face as she bolted down the stairwell, her lungs screaming for air. She burst outside, collapsing on the sidewalk as the building groaned, windows shattering in a cascade of glass. Sirens wailed too late as firefighters swarmed, hoses blasting the inferno. Her home, her father's last tether, was ash in minutes. The blaze a racial torch lit by Dutton's hand. What had she lost in those flames? Keisha ran up, freed from jail by a friend's bail money, her face streaked with soot and tears as she grabbed Nia's arm. "Oh God, Nia!" she cried, pulling her close. They stumbled through the crowd, smoke curling into the night, and reached Nia's car, parked a block away since the tow. The hood gleamed under a street lamp, but as Nia neared, her stomach twisted. Words scarred the metal, carved deep with a blade. Leave or burn. Keisha's gasp was a knife in Nia's chest, her sister's trembling hands clutching her sleeve. Nia stared at the threat, her breath ragged, the fire's roar still echoing in her ears. Was this Dutton's final warning? The crowd thinned, firefighters shouting over the hiss of water, but Nia's world narrowed to those jagged letters. Her apartment was gone, her evidence likely ashes, her fine $1 million noose. Dutton's empire wasn't cracking, It was fighting back with fire, a racial vengeance that torched her life to cinders. She'd stood in his courtroom, exposed his cop, won Keisha's bail, but he'd countered with a blaze that left her homeless. Penniless, hunted. Keisha shivered beside her, safe for now, but the carved words promised more. Nia's Yale mind spun, searching for a move, but her heart pounded with raw fury. She'd beaten his thugs, outsmarted his frame-up, only to watch him burn her world. What could she do against this? She guided Keisha away, the car's engine rumbling as they drove into the night, the fire's glow fading in the rear view. Her hands gripped the wheel, knuckles white, resolve hardening like molten steel, cooling fast. Dutton thought this would break her, send her running with her tail tucked. He didn't know she'd forged herself in harder fires, survived rooms that wanted her gone. Her home was ash, her sister shaken, but her fight burned hotter than his flames. She'd find a way, hit him where it hurt, make him choke on his own hate. The road stretched dark ahead, a path to nowhere, but Nia's eyes gleamed with purpose. He'd regret this night. What price would he pay? If you think Nia's courage to face Dutton head-on deserves a cheer, comment number 1 below. Hit that like button and subscribe for the next explosive chapter. Was she reckless to storm his courtroom with that footage, or was it her only shot at justice? Drop your thoughts, because the fire's just the start. What's Dutton's next brutal play to crush her spirit? Nia Ellis sat hunched in the passenger seat of her rusting sedan, parked in a shadowed alley, 3 blocks from the smoldering husk of her apartment. The night air seeped through a cracked window, cold and sharp with the bite of ash, while Keisha gripped the wheel beside her, eyes darting to every passing headlight. The fire's glow still haunted Nia's vision, the leave or burn carved into her hood, a scar she couldn't unsee. Her home was gone, her fine ballooned to $1 million, but she'd salvaged one weapon, a backup USB stashed in her car's glove box, holding Jamal's memos. Her fingers brushed its cool plastic, a lifeline in the wreckage. Could the feds turn this into Dutton's noose? She'd spent the drive south to a payphone, the last relic on Dayton's fraying edge, feeding quarters with trembling hands to call the FBI's Cincinnati field office. Her voice had been a steel thread, recounting Dutton's racket, fines, foreclosures, Hensley's land grabs, while the operator patched her to Agent Lena Brooks, a black woman whose clipped tone cut through the static. Send it, and we'll move. Nia had raced to a library 10 miles out, Keisha's car coughing exhaust, and emailed the files from a public computer, her pulse hammering as the upload bar crept to full. She'd breathed relief, picturing federal boots storming Dutton's world. Was this her checkmate? By noon the feds struck. Nia watched from a gas station TV, its screen flickering in the corner as news choppers buzzed over Hensley's downtown office. Agent Brooks led the charge, her navy jacket stark against the glass tower, agents hauling boxes of ledgers and drives into vans. The anchor's voice buzzed. FBI raids Victor Hensley's properties amid allegations of fraud tied to judicial misconduct. Nia's chest loosened, a rare exhale as Keisha squeezed her arm, her sister's face bright with fragile hope. "They're hitting him, Nia," she whispered, voice cracking. "You did this." Nia nodded, her Yale mind ticking through outcomes. Indictments, warrants, Dutton's empire cracking. Had she finally outflanked him? The gas station's coffee burned her tongue as she sipped, eyes glued to the screen. Brooks faced the cameras, her jaw set, words measured. "We're investigating systemic corruption targeting vulnerable communities. No one's above the law." Nia's lips twitched, a flicker of triumph piercing the exhaustion. She'd lost her home, her savings, but this raid was a blow Dutton couldn't dodge. Keisha leaned against her, the car's leather creaking, and for a moment they were just sisters, not pawns in a racial war. Nia imagined Dutton pacing his chambers, Hensley sweating in a boardroom, their smug masks slipping. Could the feds really topple them? The answer came fast, a sucker punch that shattered her fragile win. By dusk, Nia's phone lit up with alerts, each one a shard of glass in her gut. A news ticker scrolled. "Attorney Nia Ellis accused of bribing court official in explosive footage." She clicked the link, her breath hitching as a grainy video played. A woman in her faded jacket, face blurred but braid unmistakable, passing a thick envelope to a clerk in a courthouse hall. The timestamp matched her last filing, a lie stitched together with chilling precision. Keisha's gasp was a knife twist. "That's not you," she cried, but the anchor's voice drowned her out. Ellis, under scrutiny for fraud, now faces bribery charges. How had they turned her strike into a scandal? The TV blared on, pundits dissecting her crime with gleeful venom. "A desperate ploy to discredit a respected judge," one sneered, his glasses glinting under studio lights. Another, a woman, with a pinched smile, added, "She's a cashier playing lawyer and now a crook." Nia's hands shook, the coffee spilling onto her lap, a scalding sting she barely felt. Doctored footage, obvious to her trained eye, shadows off, angles wrong, but the public didn't care. Her name, already smeared as a race baiter, now sank deeper into the mud. Dutton's allies had struck back, fast and surgical, flipping her federal play into a noose. Was this their endgame? She switched off the phone, her mind racing as Keisha stared, eyes wide with dread. "What now?" her sister asked, voice small. Nia didn't answer, her gaze fixed on the gas station's flickering sign, its red letters bleeding into the dusk. She'd sent the feds after Hensley, landed a hit, but Dutton's machine had countered with a lie that stuck. Her law license, her shield from Yale, was next to fall. An email pinged from the Ohio Bar Association. "Effective immediately, Nia. Ellis's license is suspended pending investigation into misconduct." Her stomach plummeted, the words a death knell. No license, no legal standing, just a cashier with $1 million fine and a sister to save. Could they strip her bare and still lose? The blow landed harder an hour later, as Nia drove them to a friend's place on the east side, a cramped row house far from the west scars. She'd barely parked when sirens split the night, red and blue lights flashing in the rear view. 2 cops stormed the car, yanking Keisha's door open before Nia could blink. "Keisha Ellis, you're back in custody," the lead barked, a wiry man with a scar slicing his brow. "Bail's revoked, new evidence." Nia lunged across the seat, her voice raw. "What evidence? She's clean." The cop smirked, dangling. The same baggie from the motel. "Found more in her jacket, lab confirmed." Keisha's cry pierced the air. "It's not mine." As they cuffed her, dragging her to the squad car, Nia stumbled out, rain soaking her jacket, her fists pounding the hood as the cops peeled away. "You planted it!" she screamed, voice lost in the downpour, the taillights fading into the wet. Dark. She'd seen the footage, knew the game, but this was ruthless. Rearresting Keisha hours after bail, using the same lie with a fresh twist. Her sister's terrified face flashed in her mind. Locked up again, a racial pawn in Dutton's chessboard. The rain plastered her hair to her skull, cold rivulets streaming down her neck, but her blood boiled. Had she misjudged the feds' power? She stood alone in the alley, the row house's lights a dim blur through the storm. The FBI raid had rattled Hensley, but Dutton had turned it against her, framing her as a briber, stripping her license, snatching Keisha back. Her evidence had sparked hope, a federal lifeline only for his allies to sever it with a lie so bold it choked her. $1 million loomed, her home was ash, her sister caged, and now her career dangled by a thread. Nia's breath hitched, a sob she swallowed hard. She'd thought the feds would shield her, crack Dutton's empire. Instead, he'd turned her gambit into a public execution, racial hate fueling every move. Was she out of plays? The rain hammered. Down, pooling in the alley's cracks, a mirror to her fractured world. Nia climbed back into the car, the driver's seat damp and cold, her hands gripping the wheel until her knuckles ached. She'd lost everything tangible. Home, money, Keisha's. Freedom, but not her mind, not her fight. Dutton thought this was her end, a black woman broken by his white machine. He didn't know she'd survived worse, outsmarted bigger foes. Her Yale steel flared, a ember in the dark. She'd find a way, hit harder, make him bleed for this. The engine sputtered to life, headlights cutting through the deluge. He'd regret this night, but at what cost? Nia Ellis slipped through the back door of a basement speakeasy on Dayton's east side, the air thick with the tang of spilled bourbon and sweat-soaked leather. The room pulsed with low jazz from a scratched vinyl, shadows swaying under bare bulbs strung along the ceiling. She'd driven all night after Keisha's rearrest, rain still clinging to her jacket, her license suspension and the FBI's raid, a bitter taste she couldn't spit out. Dutton had turned her federal play into a guillotine, but she wasn't done. She spotted Tyrell in the corner, a lanky black man in his 20s hunched over a laptop, his dreads spilling over a hoodie stamped with a faded skull. Could this kid crack the walls Dutton hid behind? She slid into the booth, the vinyl creaking under her weight, and dropped a crumpled 20 on the table. "Heard you're the best with servers," she said, voice low, eyes scanning the room. "For ears." Tyrell smirked, his fingers pausing mid-type. "Depends who's asking. You the chick stirring up Dutton's mess?" Nia nodded, her jaw tight. "I need his private server cracked. Emails, proof he framed me for bribery." Tyrell's smirk faded, replaced by a glint of respect. "That's a tall order. His security's tight, but I've got tricks." "What's in it for me?" She leaned in, her breath sharp. "A cut of whatever I claw back from his racket." Was this alliance her last lifeline? He cracked his knuckles, a pop that echoed in the dim, and plugged her spare USB into his rig, its screen glowing with lines of code. "Give me 2 hours," he said, diving in, his hands a blur. Nia paced behind him, the speakeasy's hum a distant drone as her mind churned. Keisha sat in a cell. The feds had Hensley's files, but Dutton's counter, fake footage, her license gone, had gutted her. Tyrell was a long shot, a hacker she'd found through a barista who'd overheard her rant. Her Yale polish was peeling, replaced by street grit, but she'd wield it like a blade. Could this basement gamble pierce his armor? 2 hours bled into 3, the jazz looping as Tyrell muttered curses, sweat beading on his brow. Nia's boot scuffed the concrete, her pulse a steady throb until he slammed the table. "Got it," he hissed, spinning the laptop. The screen spilled Dutton's private emails, orders to plant the bribery video, timestamps matching her FBI, leak, names of dirty cops and Hensley's payouts. Nia's chest flared, a wildfire of hope licking through her veins. "This ties him to the frame-up," she said, voice trembling with fury. Tyrell grinned, ejecting the drive. "Told you I'm—" "Good, what's the play?" She snatched it, resolve hardening. "We go loud." Was this the spark to burn him down? She mapped it fast. The city council met tonight, a public stage to shove Dutton's dirt in their faces. Nia and Tyrell slipped out, the night air biting as they drove to City Hall, its brick bulk glowing under floodlights. The chamber buzzed. With suits and ties, councillors droning about budgets, oblivious to the storm crashing in. Nia barged through the double doors, Tyrell at her heels with a projector he'd rigged in the car. She plugged in the USB, her hand steady despite the tremor in her gut, and the screen flared to life. Dutton's emails splashed across the wall in stark black and white. Gasps ricocheted, a councillor choking on his water. Had she just seized? "The room?" "Judge Clarence Dutton framed me," Nia declared, her voice a whip crack cutting through the chaos. "These emails prove he faked bribery footage to bury me after I exposed his racket with Victor Hensley. He's stealing homes, rigging courts, targeting black families." The gallery erupted, phones flashing as citizens live-streamed, councillors shouting over each other. Tyrell grinned beside her, fists clenched in triumph. Nia pointed to a line on screen. Dutton ordering Hargrove to make it stick. The room spun into a frenzy, a woman in the back yelling, "He took my aunt's place." Nia stood tall, the council's gavel pounding uselessly. Was this her moment to flip the script? The chaos peaked, security lunging to unplug the projector, but the damage was done. Live streams hit the web, hashtags flaring. "Oh, Dutton exposed. Justice for Nia." She'd crashed their sanctum, turned whispers into a roar. Tyrell grabbed her arm, pulling her out as guards closed in, their shouts lost in the din. They slipped into the night, adrenaline surging, the city's pulse thrumming through the streets. Nia's breath fogged in the cold, her mind racing. She'd landed a blow, public and raw, a racial reckoning Dutton couldn't dodge. She pictured his icy eyes narrowing, his empire wobbling. Could this force his hand to crack? It didn't. Dutton's retaliation hit like a freight train. By dawn, Nia got the call from a payphone Tyrell had stashed her at. "He's down bad, Nia. Found him in an alley off 3rd. She raced over, heart slamming, and found Tyrell slumped against a dumpster, his face a pulp of bruises, dreads, matted with blood. He groaned, clutching cracked ribs, his laptop smashed beside him. "Hensley's guys," he rasped, spitting red onto the pavement. "Tailed us from the meet." Nia's knees buckled, guilt clawing her chest as she helped. Him sit up, his breath ragged. Had her boldness broken him? She called a cab, getting Tyrell to a clinic, her hands shaking as she paid with borrowed cash. He'd live, but the cost stung, a reminder of Dutton's reach. She returned to the alley, pacing the blood-streaked gravel, when her phone buzzed with a photo that stopped her cold. Her mother's grave, a modest stone in Oakwood Cemetery, lay unearthed, the dirt piled high, headstone smashed to rubble, scrawled across the shards in dripping paint. Next, Nia's breath seized, a wail trapped in her throat. The racial venom sank deeper, a desecration of her roots, her dead. Was this Dutton's line in the sand? She sank to the curb, the photo trembling in her grip, the alley's stench of rot and oil choking her. Tyrell beaten, her mother's rest defiled. Dutton's counter wasn't just brutal, it was personal, a racial wound carved into her soul. She'd crashed the council, exposed his emails, thought the public's roar would shield her. Instead, he'd struck her allies, her past, with a savagery that left her reeling. Her evidence had landed, sparked outrage, but his machine roared back, louder, uglier. Nia's hands curled into fists, nails biting her palms until they bled. She'd drawn blood, but he'd drawn hers. Could she survive this escalation? The morning sun crept up, a weak glow over Dayton's jagged skyline, casting long shadows across the alley. Nia stood, the photo slipping into her pocket, her resolve a smouldering coal in her chest. Tyrell's pain, her mother's grave. They were fuel now, not chains. Dutton thought this would snap her, make her kneel. He didn't know she'd forged herself in grief, sharpened her edge on loss. Her Yale mind spun, plotting the next strike, but her heart burned with a primal vow. She'd bury him for this, for every scar he'd etched. The city hummed around her, unaware of the war brewing. What horrors waited in his next blow? If you think Nia's fearless council crash was a game-changer, comment number 1 below, hit that like button, and subscribe for the next heart-pounding turn. Did she push too far by dragging Tyrell into this, or was going public her only shot at Dutton? Share your take, because the stakes just got personal. What's Dutton's next move to shatter her resolve? Nia Ellis sat cross-legged on a stained mattress in a safe house on Dayton's north side, the room a cave of peeling plaster and flickering fluorescent light. Tyrell's hacked files glowed on a borrowed tablet, their damning words, Dutton's. Orders to frame her, Hensley's payouts, a lifeline after the council crash and her mother's grave torn open. Keisha languished in jail. Tyrell nursed cracked ribs, and Nia's world was ash. But these emails were her sword. She typed furiously, drafting a federal lawsuit against Dutton and Hensley, her fingers raw from hours of work. The suit claimed racketeering, civil rights violations, and fraud, each count backed by Tyrell's haul. Could this legal spear finally pierce their empire? She filed it electronically, her suspended license a ghost in the system, using a loophole from her Yale. Tased to lodge it as a citizen's claim. The tablet pinged confirmation, and Nia exhaled, the air stale with dust and desperation. She'd sent copies to every major news outlet, banking on the council chaos to amplify her strike. By noon, the headlines screamed, "Black Woman Sues. Judge Dutton for Corruption in Ohio Shocker." National networks picked it up, pundits dissecting her case, civil rights groups rallying online. The West Side buzzed again, whispers of her name a spark in the gloom. Her chest tightened, a mix of dread and fire. Had she just lit a beacon? The coverage swelled, a tidal wave crashing over Dayton's steel-grey streets. Protests flared anew, bigger now, spilling beyond the courthouse to Hensley's downtown tower, signs waving under a bruised sky. End Dutton's reign. Nia watched from the safe house window, a sliver of glass framing the chaos, her breath fogging the pain. Tyrell, patched up and hobbling, had slipped her the tablet before vanishing to heal. She'd landed a blow, national eyes pinning Dutton's allies, making them squirm. Her lips twitched, a grim satisfaction cutting through the exhaustion. She'd lost her license, her home, but this lawsuit was a roar they couldn't silence. Was this her turning point? It wasn't. Dutton's trap sprang shut with a brutality that stole her air. Dusk settled, the safehouse's shadows deepening, when boots thundered up the stairs. The door splintered under a battering ram. Dayton. PD flooding in, their flashlights blinding as they barked, "Nia Ellis, you're under arrest!" She stumbled back, heart slamming, as a burly cop with a shaved head yanked her arms behind her, cuffs biting her wrists. "Hacking government. Servers," he growled, shoving her toward the hall. "Felony charges courtesy of Judge Dutton." Her tablet lay smashed on the floor, its screen a spiderweb of cracks, Tyrell's files gone. How had they tracked her here? The precinct swallowed her, a concrete maw of flickering bulbs and stale coffee. They tossed her into a holding cell, its bars rusted, the cot a slab of steel. Nia paced, her boots scuffing the grime, mind racing. The lawsuit had hit hard, sparked headlines, but Dutton's allies had flipped it fast, pinning the hack on her with planted evidence. Her arrest splashed across the news, a fresh smear. Disgraced attorney caught in cybercrime sting. She clenched her fists, nails digging into her palms. They'd raided Hensley, locked Keisha up, burned her home, now this. Her Yale steel bent, but didn't break. Could she outsmart this cage? Hours bled into night, the cell's chill seeping into her bones, when a guard sauntered up, a squat man with a pockmarked face and a sneer. He leaned against the bars, his breath sour with tobacco. "Dutton says confess," he rasped, voice low so the others wouldn't hear. "Say you faked it all or Keisha dies inside. Accident, real quiet." Nia's blood froze, her sister's face flashing, bruised, terrified, cuffed again. She lunged, gripping the bars, her voice a hiss. "Tell him to try it. I'll bury." "To him first." The guard chuckled, retreating, but his words lingered like poison. Was Keisha's life the price of her defiance? She sank to the cot, the guard's threat a weight crushing her chest. Confess and she'd lose everything, her fight, her name, her father's legacy. Refuse and Keisha could vanish, another black life snuffed out by Dutton's hate. Her mind spun, searching for a move, when an idea flared, reckless and raw. She stood banging the bars with her fist, shouting, "I'm not eating till you let me out." The guards laughed, but she doubled down, refusing water, food, her voice echoing through the cell block. By morning, her hunger strike went viral, West Side voices amplifying it online. Free Nia now. Could this force their hand? Days blurred, her stomach a hollow ache, her legs trembling as she paced. The strike spread, protests swelling outside the precinct, chants rattling the windows. News vans circled, cameras catching her gaunt face through the bars, a symbol of resistance. Her body weakened, vision blurring, but her will burned, a coal refusing to die. On day 3, the precinct buckled under pressure, the DA muttering about public safety as they cut her loose. Nia stumbled out, rain soaking her skin, the crowd's roar a lifeline pulling her upright. She'd won release, beaten the cell, but at what cost? Her breath steadied, resolve flaring. Had she turned their trap against them? The victory soured fast, a bitter pill swallowed in the downpour. Nia hitched a ride to her father's rental property, the last shard of his dream, hoping to crash there with Tanya, the tenant. She rounded the corner, rain streaking her face, and froze. The house was gone. A bulldozer growled over a flattened lot, its blade slick with mud, the brick walls she'd played beside as a kid now rubble under steel tracks. Hensley's crew lounged nearby, hard hats gleaming, grins sharp as knives. "Court order," one shouted, waving a forged paper. "Property seized for unpaid fines." Nia's knees buckled, a wail trapped in her throat. Was this Dutton's final cut? She staggered forward, mud sucking at her boots, the rain a curtain blurring the wreckage. Tanya stood on the sidewalk, arms wrapped around her kids, tears mixing with the wet. "They came at dawn," she sobbed. "Gave us 10 minutes to grab what we could." Nia's eyes locked on the debris, a splintered chair leg jutting from the pile, her father's handiwork crushed. $1 million had been a threat. This was its teeth, a racial erasure of her roots. She'd filed the suit, won her freedom, only for Dutton to bulldoze her past. Her hands shook, rage drowning the hunger's ache. Could she rebuild from this ruin? The bulldozer's engine roared, Hensley's men laughing as they tossed bricks into a truck, their voices a taunt in the storm. Nia stood soaked, the crowd's cheers a distant echo, her victory hollowed out. The lawsuit had sparked national fury, forced her release, but Dutton's machine had countered with a blow that left her nothing tangible. Home, property, Keisha's freedom, all gone. Her mother's grave desecrated, her sister caged. Now, to this. She'd thought the feds, the strike, would shield her. Instead, he'd stripped her bare, a racial vendetta carving away her world. Nia's breath hitched, her Yale mind plotting through the haze. He'd regret this. What price would she exact? Nia Ellis stood in the shadow of a sagging bus stop, rain dripping from the hood of her jacket, her breath fogging in the chill of Dayton's pre-dawn gloom. The bulldozed rubble of her father's property haunted her vision, a wound still bleeding from yesterday's loss, but her mind was a steel trap snapping shut on a plan. Keisha sat in jail, Tyrell nursed bruises, her license was gone, and Dutton's empire loomed unbroken, a racial juggernaut that had torched her world. She'd lost everything but her grit, and now she'd use it to bait him. She typed a fake motion on a burner phone, her fingers stiff with cold, requesting a hearing to withdraw all claims and confess. Could this lure him into her web? She sent it to the clerk's office, spoofing her old legal ID, knowing Dutton's ego would leap at the chance to gloat. The response came fast. Hearing set for noon, courtroom 5, live streamed due to public outcry. Nia's lips curled, a thin smile cutting through the exhaustion. She'd spent the night rigging the trap with a West Side tech kid, a skinny teen named Marcus, who'd wired a hidden camera to her jacket's button, streaming to a protest group's feed. Her surrender was a Trojan horse packed with Tyrell's hacked emails ready to spring. She ditched the phone in a gutter, its splash lost in the rain, and headed to the courthouse. Was this her last roll of the dice? Noon hit, and Nia strode into courtroom 5, the air thick with the musk of polished oak and tension. The gallery overflowed, West Side faces packed tight, their murmurs a low growl under the vaulted ceiling. Dutton sat high on his bench, robes draped like a king's mantle, icy blue eyes glinting with triumph as she approached the plaintiff's table. "Miss Ellis," he drawled, gavel resting in his thick hand, "finally come to your senses?" Nia nodded, her voice steady despite the storm in her chest. "I'm here to withdraw my claims, Your Honor. I've got evidence to present, though." She held up a USB, a decoy loaded with gibberish, her real weapon in her words. Could she bait him into the snare? Dutton's grin widened, a predator scenting blood. "Evidence of your surrender. By all means, indulge us." He waved her forward, leaning back, his jowls quivering with glee. Nia stepped up, her boots scuffing the marble, and plugged the USB into the projector, her camera humming live. The screen flickered, showing nonsense charts, but she didn't flinch. "This proves I was wrong," she said, her tone flat, goading him. "You've always been fair, right? No rigging cases, no targeting black folks?" Dutton chuckled a wet rasp and took the bait, his voice booming. "Of course I'm fair. I've run this court clean for decades, bending over backwards for your kind. Rigging? I've crushed every case you've thrown, Ellis, because I control the game." Had he just stepped into her trap? The gallery shifted, a ripple of gasps as Nia pressed harder, her voice rising. "So those fines, the foreclosures, Hensley's deals, they're all legit? No frame-ups, no planted drugs?" Dutton's eyes narrowed, but his arrogance held, his gavel tapping the bench. "Legit as daylight. I've got clerks, cops, every lever in this county. You think you scared me with your little lawsuit? I've buried smarter pests than you." Nia's heart leapt, her camera catching every word, the stream exploding online. She dropped the mask, her tone ice-cold. "Good to know, the world's hearing you now." The screen stayed gibberish, but his confession rang clear. Was this the crack she'd prayed for? The room erupted, shouts bouncing off the walls as phones lit up, live streams spiking with views. Dutton's face twitched, a flicker of doubt piercing his smirk, but he doubled down, slamming his gavel. "Order! This is my court!" Nia stood firm, her camera's red dot a silent witness. "Not anymore," she said, voice cutting through the chaos. "You just admitted it, live for millions." The gallery roared, a tidal wave of fury, and Dutton's hand trembled, realization dawning too late. Double doors burst open, federal agents swarming in, badges flashing, led by Agent Lena Brooks, her navy jacket stark against the oak. Had the feds been waiting for this? "Clarence Dutton," Brooks barked, striding down the aisle. "You're under arrest for corruption, racketeering, and civil rights violations." The agents flanked him, cuffs gleaming as he sputtered, backing off the bench. "This is absurd. I'm untouchable here." His voice cracked, but Brooks slapped the steel on his wrists, his gavel clattering to the floor. Nia smirked, a quiet thrill surging as the gallery cheered, fists pumping the air. The stream hit fever pitch, our Dutton down trending worldwide. She'd tricked him, turned his ego into a noose, and the feds had pounced mid-sentence. Was this her? Victory at last? She slipped out as agents hauled Dutton away, his icy glare locking with hers, a snarl twisting his lips before he vanished through the doors. The crowd mobbed her on the steps, voices shouting her name, but Nia's legs shook, the adrenaline fading to a hollow buzz. She'd won this round, toppled the king in his own lair, but the war felt far from over. Keisha was still caged, her property rubble, her life a threadbare rag. She ducked into an alley, catching her breath, rain pattering on her hood when tires screeched nearby. A black van screeched to a halt, doors flying open, and Hensley's men lunged out, faces masked, fists swinging. Had Dutton's fall unleashed? His dogs? Nia spun, but they were fast, a meaty hand clamping her arm, another slamming her gut. She doubled over, gasping, as they dragged her into the van, the door slamming shut with a clang. The interior stank of oil and fear, the floor cold steel under her knees as they zip-tied her wrists, a hood yanked over her head. "Dutton's down, but you're done," a voice growled, thick with hate, his breath hot through the fabric. "Keisha's next, real slow." Nia's blood surged, her body aching as she twisted against the ties, the van lurching forward. A fist cracked her jaw, stars bursting in the dark, and she slumped, pain searing her skull. Was this the cost of her trap? The van rumbled, potholes jolting her bruised frame, the men's laughter a jagged edge in her ears. She'd baited Dutton, won his confession, watched him cuffed. But Hensley's crew had counted in hours, a racial ambush to finish her. Her mind raced, Yale tactics clashing with raw survival, searching for a crack in this cage. The hood smothered, her breath, her jaw throbbing, but her resolve flared, a ember refusing to die. She toppled Dutton, cracked his empire, only for his shadows to strike harder. Keisha's name echoed, a vow she'd fight for. Could she claw out of this alive? The van slowed, gravel crunching under tires, and Nia braced, her heart a war drum in her chest. They'd kill her here, or worse, use her to break Keisha. Dutton's arrest hadn't stopped his machine. It had unleashed its deadliest teeth, a racial vendetta with no brakes. She'd thought the feds would end it, that her live-streamed win was the final blow. Instead, it had painted a target, and Hensley's men were the bullet. Her wrists burned against the ties, her body screaming, but her mind sharpened, plotting through the haze. She'd beat Dutton once, she'd beat this too. What hell waited outside that door? Nia Ellis thrashed against the zip ties binding her wrists, the black hood over her head suffocating her with its stale, oily stench. The van's steel floor jolted under her knees, Hensley's men laughing as they traded punches, each blow a dull thud against her ribs. Blood streaked her face, warm and sticky from a split lip, her jaw a throbbing pulse of pain after their ambush outside the courthouse. Dutton was cuffed, his confession live-streamed, but these thugs, Hensley's shadows, had snatched her in, minutes, vowing Keisha's death next. Her mind spun, Yale tactics clashing with raw instinct, until her fingers brushed a loose pipe rattling in the corner. Could this be her way out? The van lurched, a sharp turn throwing her against the wall, and the pipe clattered closer. She twisted, her bound hands snagging it, its cold weight a lifeline in the dark. The men's chatter masked her grunts, one muttering about dumping her by dawn. Nia's pulse surged, rage drowning the fear, and she swung the pipe blind, a wild arc that smashed into a skull with a wet crack. A howl split the air, the hood muffling their curses as she ripped it off, eyes adjusting to the dim. The hulking thug clutched his head, blood streaming, while the lean one lunged, fist cocked. Had she just bought her freedom? She ducked, his punch grazing her ear, and drove the pipe up, cracking his kneecap with a snap that echoed in the tight space. He crumpled, screaming, and Nia slashed the ties on a jagged edge of the van's frame, her wrists raw but free. The driver shouted, swerving, but she kicked the back door, metal groaning as it burst open. Night air rushed in, the river's silver glint flashing past, and she leapt, tumbling onto gravel, the pipe skittering away. The van screeched to a halt, headlights swinging, but Nia bolted into the dark, her legs pumping despite the ache, blood streaking her face like war paint. Could she outrun their hunt? She stumbled through brush along the riverbank, thorns snagging her jacket, the city's jagged skyline a distant blur under a star-streaked sky. Her lungs burned, each breath a rasp, but she pushed south, dodging, the van's roar fading behind her. She'd beaten them, cracked a skull, escaped their cage, a racial death squad sent to silence her. Dutton's arrest hadn't stopped Hensley. It had unleashed his worst, a vendetta to erase her and Keisha. Nia's boots sank into mud, her body screaming, but her mind sharpened, plotting. She needed allies, a counterstrike to gut his empire. Who could she trust now? Dawn broke. A weak grey wash over Dayton as Nia reached a payphone near a shuttered gas station, its glass cracked but humming. She dialed Jamal Carter, the clerk who'd slipped her the first memos, her voice hoarse as he picked up. "It's me. Hensley's men jumped me, but I'm out. Meet me, bring Tyrell." Jamal hesitated, his breath shaky. "They got Tyrell bad, Nia. He's hobbling but alive." "Where?" She named a diner off Route 35, the same spot she'd met him before, and hung up, her split lip stinging as she limped there, the river's chill clinging to her bones. Was this crew enough to fight back? They met her in a booth, Jamal's eyes hollow with worry. Tyrell leaning on a cane, his face a map of purple welts from his beating. The diner buzzed with early truckers, coffee pots clinking, but their corner was a fortress of whispers. Nia slid Tyrell the burner phone she'd grabbed from a pawn shop, her plans spilling out. "We hack Hensley's finances, freeze his accounts, choke his cash flow. Dutton's down, but he's the head. We kill the body." Tyrell nodded, pain etching his grin. "I can crack his banks, reroute it all to dummy shells. Jamal's got court codes to mask it." Could this cripple Hensley's machine? They worked fast, Tyrell's laptop glowing as he breached Hensley's private accounts, his fingers a blur despite the cane propped beside him. Nia fed him passwords from Jamal's courthouse leaks, her voice a low growl over the diner's hum. Millions drained, Hensley's real estate fronts, offshore stashes, funneled into frozen traps untraceable by morning. Jamal's codes buried the trail, a legal ghost in the system. Nia's chest flared, a savage thrill as the numbers ticked to zero. She'd rallied them, turned pain into power, and struck Hensley's heart. The West Side would cheer this, a racial reckoning in code. Had she just leveled the field? By noon, protests swelled, a wildfire sparked by whispers of Hensley's collapse. Crowds surged outside his downtown tower, a glass monolith now a target, their chants a drumbeat shaking the streets. Nia watched from a rooftop a block away, Jamal and Tyrell beside her, the air thick with smoke as Molotovs flew. Flames licked Hensley's offices, windows shattering in bursts of orange and black, the mob's fury a roar that drowned the sirens. She'd gutted his money, and they'd torched his throne. Her split lip twitched, a smirk breaking through the blood. Dutton cuffed, Hensley broke. Was this her win at last? It wasn't. Dusk fell, a bruised purple cloak over Dayton as Nia slipped to Keisha's jail, a squat brick bunker on the city's edge. She'd free her sister next, use the chaos to force a release. She crossed the lot, her jacket torn, when A crack split the air, a sniper's bullet grazing her arm, tearing fabric and flesh. She dove behind a dumpster, blood seeping hot down her sleeve, her heart slamming as she scanned the rooftops. A shadow shifted, gone in a blink, but a note fluttered down, pinned to the pavement by a rock. She's dead tomorrow. Nia's breath seized, Keisha's name a scream in her mind. Had Dutton's hand reached from his cell? She snatched the note, its ink smudged but sharp, her arm throbbing as blood dripped onto the concrete. The shot was a warning, the threat, a blade at her throat. Dutton, locked in federal custody, had ordered a hit, his racial hate a ghost striking through bars. She'd frozen Hensley's cash, sparked riots, thought she'd crushed them. But this was his counter, a promise to snuff Keisha's life. Nia's knees shook, the dumpster's stench of rot choking her, but she stood, clutching the note, her resolve a jagged edge. She'd beaten the van, rallied her crew, only for this to land. Could she save her sister from this? The jail loomed across the lot, its lights a harsh glare through the dusk, guards pacing the fence. Nia's arm bled, a steady drip staining her boots, but her mind raced, Yale tactics weaving through the pain. She'd gutted Hensley's empire, watched his offices burn, but Dutton's reach was a hydra, sprouting new heads. Keisha, bruised and caged, was his last play, a racial pawn to break her. Nia's breath steadied, her eyes narrowing as she stuffed the note in her pocket, the sniper's echo fading. She'd fought free once, struck back twice. She'd do it again, whatever it took. What hell would she face to pull Keisha out? Night deepened, the city a cauldron of smoke and sirens as Nia limped away, her arm a dull roar, the note a weight against her chest. Hensley's men were reeling, his cash gone, his offices ash. But Dutton's hit lingered, a racial curse from a cell. She'd rallied Jamal and Terrell, turned their pain into a weapon, thought the protests would shield her. Instead, they'd painted a bullseye, and Keisha was the target. Her split lip bled anew, her body screaming, but her will burned, a coal in the dark. She'd save her sister, bury them all. What cost would this next fight demand? Nia Ellis staggered through Dayton's shadowed streets, her arm a throbbing mess of blood and torn fabric, the sniper's bullet a graze that burned like acid under her jacket. The note, "She's dead tomorrow," crumpled in her pocket, its ink a venomous promise from Dutton, caged but still clawing at Keisha's life. Hensley's offices smouldered in the distance, protests raging, but Nia's world narrowed to the jail's brick bulk ahead, its floodlights slicing the dusk. She'd beaten his thugs, frozen his cash, watched him cuffed, yet here she was, hunted, her sister a breath from death. Her boots splashed through puddles, rain mixing with blood, as her Yale mind forged a plan, reckless and sharp. She'd storm that jail, bluff her way in, pull Keisha out before the hit landed. Could she outrun Dutton's ghost? She ducked into an all-night print shop 2 blocks away, its neon sign buzzing like a trapped fly, the clerk a bored kid with earbuds dangling. Nia snatched a computer, her arm dripping onto the keys, and hacked a template from her law school days, forging a release order. She typed fast, mimicking the county's seal, her breath ragged as she named Keisha Ellis, citing procedural error and immediate discharge. Her license was gone, but her genius wasn't. She'd bluff the guards, banking on chaos, to blur their eyes. The printer whirred, spitting out the paper, and she grabbed it, ink still wet, folding it into her jacket. Was this forgery her last stand? The jail loomed closer, its fence a steel snarl under the sky's purple bruise. Nia limped to the gate, her face a mask of grit despite the blood streaking her cheek. The forged order clutched tight. She banged the buzzer, voice steady as granite. "Urgent release, federal override," she barked, flashing the paper through the slot. The guard, a lanky man with a patchy beard, squinted at it, his radio crackling with protest chatter. "This legit," he grumbled, but Nia cut him off, her tone ice-cold. "Check it later or explain to the feds why you stalled." He hesitated, then buzzed her in, the gate clanking open. Had she just cracked their wall? Inside, the jail stank of bleach and despair, fluorescent tubes buzzing overhead as Nia strode to the desk, her arm throbbing with every step. She slapped the order down, staring down a second guard, a stocky woman with a buzz cut and a scowl. "Keisha Ellis now," Naya snapped, her voice a whip. The woman scanned the paper, brow furrowing, but the radio's chaos, riots, Hensley's fall, drowned her doubt. "Fine," she muttered, keying a code, and minutes later, Keisha shuffled. Out, wrists raw from cuffs, eyes wide with shock. "Naya," she gasped, lunging into her arms, a sob breaking free. Naya held her tight, blood smearing Keisha's shirt, relief a tidal wave. Could they escape this hell together? They bolted out, the guard's shout trailing as Naya dragged Keisha through a side exit, her sister's legs shaky but keeping pace. The night swallowed them, rain hammering the pavement as they ducked into an alley, Keisha's breath hitching. "They were gonna kill me," she whispered, clutching Nia's good arm. "I heard 'em planning." Nia's jaw tightened, the sniper's note a weight in her pocket, but she pushed forward, guiding them to a borrowed car stashed by Jamal. The engine sputtered alive, headlights cutting the dark as they sped south, the jail shrinking behind them. She'd bluffed her way in, snatched Keisha from Dutton's hit, but her gut twisted. Was this freedom real? Meanwhile, across town, federal agents stormed Dutton's cell in the county lockup, a concrete box where he'd stewed since Nia's. Live-streamed trap. Agent Lena Brooks led the raid, her boots echoing as she shoved past guards, warrant in hand. They tore through his mattress, desk, walls, finding a burner phone taped under the sink, its logs spilling calls to Hensley's crew. Brooks's radio crackled with updates. The sniper pinned to a rooftop near the jail, nabbed mid-aim, his rifle still warm. Nia's escape had synced with the Fed's move, a double strike she hadn't planned. Dutton's icy eyes blazed as they cuffed him tighter, his snarl muffled by steel. Had she just dodged his bullet? Nia pulled into a safe house on the west side, a crumbling duplex Tanya had lent her, its windows boarded but warm inside. Keisha collapsed on a couch, trembling, as Nia locked the door, her arm a dull roar she ignored. She flipped on a TV, its screen flickering to life with breaking news. Dutton and Hensley face federal charges after sniper bust. Brooks stood at a podium, voice sharp. "We've linked a hit order to Dutton, executed by Hensley's men targeting Nia and Keisha Ellis. Racketeering, fraud, attempted murder, they're done." Nia's breath caught, the sniper's face flashing, a hired gun caught red-handed. Could this finally end their nightmare? She sank beside Keisha, the TV droning as footage rolled, Dutton in cuffs, Hensley's office's ash, the sniper's rifle bagged, her lawsuit, Terrell's hack, the live stream. They'd buried both men. Their empires crumbling under federal weight. Protests still raged, but now with triumph West Side voices chanting her name. Nia's split lip twitched, a faint smirk breaking through the blood and exhaustion. She'd stormed the jail, freed Keisha, and the feds had sealed the trap all in one night. Her arm bled onto the couch, but her chest swelled, a savage pride flaring. Had she won the war at last? The news cut to a presser, Brooks detailing charges, Dutton's hit list, Hensley's cash trails, decades of stolen homes. Nia leaned back, Keisha's head on her shoulder, the duplex's quieter balm after months of hell. She'd lost her apartment, her father's property, her license, but she'd saved her sister, toppled a kingpin, gutted his machine. The West Side could rebuild now, families clawing back what Dutton took. Her eyes drifted shut, the TV's hum fading, when a knock rattled. The door soft but insistent. Nia tensed, hand on a kitchen knife, and cracked it open. Jamal stood there, face pale, a tape recorder in his grip. Was this a late victory gift? "Nia," he said, voice low, shoving the recorder into her hands. "Found this in the courthouse. Vault, hidden deep. Dutton stashed it before the arrest." She hit play, her gut twisting as his voice crackled through, calm and cold. "If I go down, Ellis takes the fall. Planted evidence, murder of a clerk pinned on her. Ere this, ruin her." The tape clicked off, Nia's breath seizing, Keisha's gasp a shard in the silence. A clerk's body, found last year, unsolved. Dutton had framed her, a preset bomb, to detonate if he fell. Her victory flipped, a trap springing shut from beyond his cell. Had she won only to lose everything? She stood, the knife clattering to the floor, her arm's blood a stark red against the dim light. Jamal stammered, It's not aired yet, but his allies have it. They'll push it soon. Nia's mind raced, Yale steel clashing with raw panic. She'd exposed Dutton live, watched him cuffed, freed Keisha, crushed Hensley. Yet this tape, a racial lie from the grave, turned her triumph to ash. Murder charges, fabricated but sticky, would undo her, jail her, smear her name forever. Keisha grabbed her hand, trembling. What do we do? Nia's eyes hardened, the safehouse's walls closing in. Could she outrun this final curse? She paced, the recorder a hot coal in her palm, the TV still flickering with victory she couldn't taste. The feds had Dutton, Hensley the sniper, but his allies lurked, ready to air this lie. Her arm throbbed, her body begged rest, but her will flared, a ember in the dark. She'd beaten every blow, fines, fire, frame-ups, bullets, only for this to strike, a racial vendetta's last. Gasp. We vanish, she said, voice steady despite the chaos. Before they play it, we're gone. Keisha nodded, eyes wide as Nia grabbed a bag, stuffing essentials, her mind plotting a shadow life. Was this exile her only escape? They slipped out the back, the duplex dark behind them, Dayton's skyline a jagged scar under the moon. Jamal drove them north, his car rattling, the tape a silent threat in Nia's pocket. She'd won the war, Dutton jailed, Hensley broke, Keisha safe, but this twist forced her underground, a fugitive genius dodging a lie. The west side would heal, but she'd vanish, her name a whisper, her fight unfinished. Her arm bled through the bandage, her face a map of scars, but her eyes gleamed, plotting through the haze. She'd rebuild, strike back one day. The road stretched into the night, a fugitive's path. What future waited in the dark? Nia Ellis's journey unveils a stark truth. Justice isn't a gift, it's a battlefield. Her fight against Judge Clarence Dutton and Victor Hensley exposes how systemic racism can weaponize power, stripping black communities of homes, dignity and lives through calculated corruption. Nia's resilience, forged in loss and sharpened by intellect, teaches that defiance can crack even the toughest empires, but victory often comes at a brutal cost. She lost her home, her father's legacy, and nearly her sister, yet her cunning turned their own arrogance against them, toppling a racist juggernaut with evidence and grit. The lesson here is clear. Exposing truth demands sacrifice, and the system doesn't bend. It breaks only when forced. Her story also reveals the power of community and persistence. The West Side's protests, sparked by Nia's leaks, amplified. Her voice proving that collective rage can shift tides where lone battles falter. Yet the final twist, Dutton's hidden tape framing her for murder, underscores a bitter reality. Even in triumph, racism's shadows linger, ready to strike back. Nia's exile as a fugitive genius reminds us that justice is a marathon, not a sprint, and vigilance is the price of progress. What can we take from her? That fighting isn't just about winning, it's about enduring, adapting, and striking, again when the odds turn. So what do you think? Did Nia's relentless fight inspire you, or was her cost too high? Comment below, hit like if you stand with her, and subscribe for more tales of grit and justice. Share this with someone who needs to see it, because stories like hers fuel change. Thanks for joining this journey. Stay bold, stay fierce, and keep pushing forward.